Hello, I'm John McGovern, and today I'm going to be discussing Book 6 of Edmund Spenser's epic poem, The Faerie Queene. Book 6 centres around the theme of courtesy, which was a very important theme at the time. There was a medieval and Renaissance tradition of the courtesy book, for example. These were books that taught people how to be polite and courteous to each other. And Spenser insists that the most important kind of courtesy is that which springs from inside. It's not just a matter of formulaic niceties and outside expressions of courtesy. These things are important, but it's the inner courtesy which is the real key. In Canto 2, Spenser says that everybody should be virtuous, including men and women of all social classes. However, he does suggest that gentlemen are the most likely to be courteous, because, as he says, gentle blood will gentle manners breed. So courtesy is something which is open to everybody, but in practice, gentlemen and aristocrats courtesy is more available to them. The main character of the book is a knight called Sir Calidore, and to be honest, Sir Calidore is one of the most forgettable characters in the poem. But his quest centres around finding a monster called the Blatant Beast, and the Blatant Beast is very memorable. The word blatant, it doesn't mean obvious, like that's a blatant mistake or something like that. It comes from the old-fashioned word blatter, ultimately from the Latin, which is meant to babble or to speak foolishly. If you look up the Blatant Beast in a book called the Spenser Encyclopedia, it says that he represents the epitome and culmination of intractable evil, and also the abuse and the perversion of language. But I would argue that actually the Blatant Beast simply represents envy. And envy is considered to be the main enemy of courtesy, and that's why the Blatant Beast is the principal enemy of this book. The beast is guided by three men called Despeto, Decetto, and Defetto, representing spite, deceit, and detraction, because Spenser associated these three negative qualities with the negative quality of envy. The Blatant Beast is described as a dog with 1,000 tongues and a poisonous bite. And the idea of the 1,000 tongues represents slander. So slander is one of the main weapons of envy. If you're envious of someone, you're going to spread rumors about them, slander them, as a way of bringing them down. And the idea of the poisonous bite is that envy is dangerous to the victim. So if someone's envious of me, I can't really influence that. I can't do anything about it, but it's going to have a harmful effect on me. Spenser's critique of envy is in part a critique of those who had criticised Lord Grey's policy in Ireland, which we discussed in the previous video. Sir Calidore is surprisingly absent from his own book, and the book is more discursive than lots of the other books. And Spenser even seems to realise this. He seems to realise that it might be seen as a poetic flaw. Towards the end of the book, Spenser writes, "For all that hitherto hath long delayed this gentle knight from serving his first quest, though out of course, yet hath not been missaid, to show the courtesy by him professed." So he's saying there's a reason I've done this, even unto the lowest and the least. But now I come unto my course again, to his achievement of the Blatant Beast, who all this while did rage and reign, whilst none was him to stop, nor none him to restrain. So reign here means arraign or accuse. And when Caledor finally encounters the Blatant Beast, Spenser gives us some more details about his physical appearance. "And therein were 1,000 tongues and pite, of sundry kinds and sundry quality. Some were of dogs that barked day and night, and some of cats that roaring still did cry. But most of them were tongues of mortal men, which spake reproachfully, not caring when nor when." So Spenser is suggesting that envious slander is so terrible that it's worse than the constant barking of a dog or the howling of a cat. And he goes on to say that envious slander even touches kings and governors. "Ne Caesars or Caesars, ne Caesars spared he a whit nor kings, but either blotted them with infamy or bit them with his baneful teeth of injury." So this is sort of a warning to the political classes that you shouldn't allow slanderous envy to get out of control, because it's going to end up coming back to bite you as well. Spenser describes the Blatant Beast invading a monastery and despoiling it, and Spenser seems to be suggesting that envy was one of the key motivating factors for the dissolution of the monasteries in Henry VIII's reign. And this might seem radical because Protestantism was still around in England in the Elizabethan period, but actually this was quite a common opinion amongst the Protestant ruling classes of Elizabeth's reign. The idea was quite a subtle one. It was that the monasteries had been places of mischief, had been places of wickedness, but also the dissolution of the monasteries, or the closure of the monasteries, had not been a completely pure process. It had been motivated in part by the envy of secular men towards the lands and possessions of the monks. At the end of the book, Caledor manages to capture the Blatant Beast, but not to completely defeat him. And Spenser says that soon afterwards he managed to escape again, and he's still at loose within the world. And by adding this detail, Spenser is suggesting that slander is still all too common in the world in which he was writing. So that's the main plot of the final book of the poem. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the most discursive books, and there are many smaller scale episodes within the book. So I've just decided to pick out 3 of the main episodes and to briefly summarize what happens in them. The first episode is that of Brianna's castle. So there's a lady called Brianna, and she employs a steward who doesn't allow anybody to pass without the ladies have to have their hair cut off, and the men have to have their beards cut off. And this is done because Brianna wants to take all of the hair and the beard hair. And the reason for this is that Brianna wants to use the hair and the beard hair to sew a mantle or a cloak and give it to a man called Caledor, and thereby convince him to marry her. So a very bizarre episode. In Canto 2, Spenser narrates the episode of Tristram and the Discourteous Knight. Tristram is a woodsman who kills a knight for being impolite. And the point of this episode is to suggest that noble blood will out, or that gentle blood will always prove itself gentle, because Tristram is descended from kings, and although living an obscure life, he ends up proving his courtesy by killing the discourteous knight. Another important episode is between Corydon and Pastorella, and this episode throws a sidelight on the key theme of envy in the book. Caledor gets distracted from his main quest by falling in love with a beautiful maiden called Pastorella, but a shepherd called Corydon has also loved Pastorella for a very long time, and this makes the new interloper, as it were, makes him very jealous. But Caledor ultimately manages to neutralize the envy of Corydon and to win him over by showing courtesy. So the idea is that if somebody is envious towards you, the best response is simply to show courtesy. So that's a very brief summary of Book 6 of the Faerie Queene, and that marks the end of this series on Spenser's poem. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more content like this in the future.